Good afternoon. My name's Tom Pickering. I've been listening to a lot of these talks and with some interest. So I think there's what I'm going to talk about is culture and getting the environment right for technology, and also avoiding the tyranny. And I'll explain what I mean. I think what good looks like is keeping the options open. And I think there's been quite a lot of comments around Zoom, for example, which is okay. I think there's I recently did a fairly rough and ready online survey around online and social media, where there's clearly a downside, and I think there's a lot of lack of knowledge around the actual implications of artificial intelligence, and there's far more people talking positively rather than the downside of AI. And I think the other thing I gave a talk, or did a quick survey on prior to this talk, was around wokeness, or the culture we seem to be creating, fear of speaking up about things, and that creates a tyranny as well. So primarily what I'm going to talk about is psychology, and that's what I've noticed really makes a difference. So the first one is around digital transformation. It implies transformation. Actually, in the public sector, there hasn't been much transformation. In fact, productivity over the last few years has got worse, despite the fact of about 5 years worth of attempts. There's a lot of emotional talk around data saves life in the private sector. We need to be careful about these statements because they're highly emotional. I think the critical thing with this is that psychology really matters, because it's important we get control and we prevent undesirable outcomes, and also get to grips with what drives us. And I'll give you some insight into that. And I think what's really matters is around thinking and open dialogue. And there's a lot of doing, I observe, but not a lot of thinking going on these calls and on the sessions today. So the first question is, how do you know if someone is thinking? And also, out of this talk, I'm going to be a bit provocative. Just drop me an email. You'll find my details on the Winning Thinking website, which is sort of summation of some of what I've learned. Just email me one thing you've taken away from this, because if through these engagements we're not doing anything different, we've got to challenge what we're doing. So, okay. So in terms of some of the introductions around the psychology, implement digital transformation strategies, improve efficiency, improve community engagement. Digital transformation is needed more than ever. These are particular types of statements, and there's another statement around implementing through the power of digital. These are all generalizations, and they create blind spots. They're also incredibly difficult to speak up against. The other thing I'd also point out is ephemeral experience, and I'll come back to that if you're not aware of what that is. It really matters in a digital environment, because I think we're being manipulated more and more at the moment. And all these things, the reason why I'm raising this is that it shuts down dialogue. What's really important, I think, is that people speak up against technology, and look at alternatives and look at the outcome. Otherwise, the discussion becomes dominated by technology. I gave a talk last week about doctors and the NHS and productivity in the NHS. And I think it's pretty clear that actually technology in the NHS is actually reducing productivity by this obsession with data, which is actually taking doctors off the front line. If anybody's interested in that talk, I'll send you a link to that. And I think I think we've realised over the last few months that people-to-people contact is really important for our well-being. And there's a heavy big four backing, big tech, all making statements like ethical AI. I did a talk on the ethics of AI to the Institute of Ethical AI, and just the implications. There's a big difference between ethical AI versus ethics in AI, and it's really important to understand these distinctions. So the other part of this is also critical thinking, which is having the courage to really speak up if something really doesn't make sense. And so there's a few different types of tech I'll just talk about. There are some things that people can't do or can't do very well, like routing vehicles, or they're modeling pandemics. Requires a lot of maths, which AI and that sort of thing is quite good for. There are things that people can do, like chatbots, and there's a real misunderstanding around efficiency versus experience. And I think the experience can be very bad, but there's a notion, and those two things get confused. The other thing around AI is that people can't keep up and they don't understand the outcome. It's that simple. And a lot of these things where we're looking to technology or data actually We just need to think it through and keep it simple. And the good thing about people is people can foresee the future if they're thinking, but I don't see a whole lot of thinking in terms of predicting the outcome in these discussions. So I think there's a big battle going on at the moment between people and machines. People don't need data to make good decisions, and the interface is like oil and water. We assume it is linear, but it's not. And a lot of these things are just obvious, so we just need to do it. And the main thing I'm really trying to make is really around the healthy debate. You know, it's highly dominated by techie people, and I think, you know, particularly in the NHS and the whole of the public sector is about supporting people who need help. You know, the notion of you know, people caring really matters, and if you bend people out of shape on one dimension, you actually bend them out of on all dimensions. So beware of people who don't care or become manipulated. And there's a real need to understand people in more detail. I think as well, you know, if you're talking about people in the NHS, there's a sort of assumption that we're sort of like machines. We're definitely not. Even biologically, we're very different. And I think, you know, when I asked the question about, you know, productivity in the NHS, which I think is what does good look like, largely it means having doctors on the front line speaking to patients and, you know, more of that. And I spoke to the head of the NHS on that. There was no measure around that, which I think is really critical. And if you ever speak to a medic, my mother was a doctor and my first wife was a nurse. They both talk about just being bogged down with paperwork. And I think the additional data related stuff will going to take them away from the front line, which will have a seriously detrimental impact on, you know, what good looks like in the NHS. So I think the critical thing is to understand where we need to stop tech, where we need to focus on, and where what good looks like for people. I mean, largely what good looks like for people is listening, and listening to different views, like some of the views I'm sharing now, and really taking interest. Are you really taking interest in what I'm saying? Not that I'm particularly asking you to do that, but if anybody speaks to you and says something different, are you interested in understanding where they're coming from? That's critical to our well-being. And I think simulation of using chatbots is also fraud, or getting towards it, where we're sort of assuming that a chatbot can replace people. So I think what good looks like is having healthy dialogue to open up the options, being clear about what technology is going to do and what's not going to do. If you listen to this discussion, it's all about the obsession with technology. We must do this, we must do that. Productivity is a massive opportunity, but not using technology. I can talk to you more about that, but basically, in a nutshell, moving the focus on data actually takes people off the front line and actually reduces it. That's notwithstanding, there are some things like passports and some other, you know, bin collections and other such transactional things which can be automated, but have to be very careful. I think the other side is also some traps around the blind spots, some of which I'm talking about now, but also the importance of underpinning responsibility with people. You know, so will doctors speak up against a technology solution? And are we creating impossible problems? And I think in a lot of situations, if you follow the wrong strategy, you are actually creating impossible problems that become impossible to fix. And beware of people saying that more tech will fix it. So, and I think, you know, more of the same, expect a different outcome is Einstein's definition of madness. So we need to be aware of that. I think the other side of this is actually misreading the new now. We've all been through a pretty harrowing time, and we need to learn something from that. I think the main learnings that we've picked up, and I ran 30 seminars last year on this with some pretty well-known people, it's about creating work at all levels. The notion that, you know, there's a lot of tedious jobs that need to be automated, actually people need tedious jobs. And actually there are some people whose tedious job is a fantastic opportunity for them, who are less fortunate than others. And that's what the public sector was set up to do, to support people who are less fortunate than others. The other aspect is around relationships, community, and also reducing technology. And the word intimacy as well, which is about getting to know each other, acknowledging people, as well as sustainability. And a lot of this is just common sense. We've just got to stop buying stuff we don't need to, and we don't need a computer to tell us to do that. So coming back to ephemeral experiences, this is important because the other side of this is that the big tech companies are actually, it's a very important concept. They're basically experiences online where the content appears and disappears, and you've got no trace of it. And these things really heavily manipulate us. So within the technology sphere, it's called an echo chamber, and people started off being pushing back on technology, and quite rightly so in my view. A lot of it's quite unhealthy versus the business outcome. And actually, these things manipulate people who are more vulnerable than others. And most of the population, over 75%, will knowingly do something wrong. There are people like me. I'm a company turnaround expert, amongst other things, who won't. So you'll find a certain degree of clarity and I hope a bit of humility. So I think the critical thing here is, what are you thinking now? What are you going to take away from what I just said? Maybe there's something that struck you, and will you act on that? Because in dialogue, we've got to move forwards. We've got to learn. And I'd like to see, and yet you'll probably notice your thinking will be reverting back to comfort zone, which is becoming technology. Technology is X, Y, Z. Technology is whatever that mantra is that's driving your behavior. And I think beware, because the implications of following a flawed strategy are quite serious. And it's the psychology that I've noticed either drives the success of a business or the detriment of a business. And it's actually what brought Baring's bank down, where people are looking for certainty in uncertain times. And they will actually knowingly make wrong decisions for the point of reaching certainty. So beware of following tech mantras without really thinking things through. I think the other side of this as well, which is interesting, and certainly I've got 2 young kids, and I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this or been on this conference have got children, is that our kids need meaningful work. We've left them in a bit of a mess with a sustainability issue, and yet we're asking them to digitize, which is dramatically reducing the work opportunities for them, and also for the technology people. I mean, this is the first time ever where industries, traditionally, if you take farming, for example, farming moved forwards when someone invented a tractor, and then there's industry around a tractor. There is no industry around technology. It's actually reducing work by and large, and it's reducing the quality of work, and it's reducing the quality of opportunities. And there's a big challenge around well-being in this. So beware. Public sector is particularly a place where you need to be careful how you drive strategy. It's spending public money, and particularly in the NHS, it's all about well-being. So, and I think it's, tech is just rather boring, really. And I think it's a really strong case at the moment for getting back to basics, starting businesses from scratch and getting back to basics. And technology is really just a service layer that sits on top of another proper business, as it were, that actually does something or sells something tangible. So I think but the 2 key things I'd like to encourage you to do out of this, and please, if there's anything that struck you, drop me an email. My email is tom@winningthinking.uk with whatever struck you out of this and what's the action you're going to take. But I think the first thing is to let people make decisions. Okay, so in terms of customer service, it's not about automation. It's about getting the best customer experience comes from people who are allowed to make decisions. And that's very rare. Process-orientated people, which was actually my background, typically like to segment things using chatbots and things, but that actually undermines people's ability to make decisions. Give them the space and give them some budget. That dramatically improves the customer experience. I think the second thing is watch out for managing the outcome, right? Just think about the outcome that you're actually creating. And don't lose sight of that, and just become aware of some of the things I've talked to you about just the whole dialogue being dominated by digital or artificial intelligence, because of that, you'll lose sight of the outcome. And I really do think we need to get back to thinking about what is actually being created. So, going back to the NHS, are we, putting more doctors on the front line, or are we, doing more analysis, which is taking away, or, more activity, getting the data right? And certainly, from my experience working in industry, I've taken out a lot of IT systems where the obsession with getting data right far exceeds the benefit. And I think we're dramatically moving towards that. So I hope you found my talk challenging, productively. I have got a sense of humour. I am a technologist by background. I spent most of I'm a fellow of the Institute of Engineering and Technology, as well as got a deep interest in psychology of which is something I've noticed really makes a difference. That's the reason why I'm sharing what I'm sharing with you in an attempt to deliver maximum bang for buck. So if you've got any questions, come back to me. But I hope my talk has been helpful. And yeah, just think about the outcome. Think about actually what are the steps you're taking, what's the plan, what are the actions you're taking going to deliver as an outcome, and that's and just make sure that you've got. There are some skill gaps here as well, by the way, in terms of blind spots and some of the psychology of what I've talked about. But notwithstanding that, I think that's what I'd encourage you guys to think about. So that's my contribution today. Have a good day.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. You're becoming a regular fixture on some of our conferences, and you're really challenging some of the thoughts and opinions of people. I think it's a really good point that you make. Really think about the outcome. Let's not just implement technology. Let's look at the problem we're trying to solve. Technology has undoubtedly changed our lives. It's changed the world. It's given us so much over the last 15 months of the pandemic, and has presented so much opportunity. But I think sometimes we can get wrapped up with something new and shiny, rather than really drilling down into what is the challenge, what is the problem we're trying to address, and how can the right tech really help us to address that problem. I think some of the solution providers that have been with us today have really demonstrated that. So thank you everybody for participating in the second PSE 365. We look forward to seeing you all again next month. All of the on-demand content from today will be available in the platform from tomorrow, and all of the on-demand content from last month's conference is available on demand now. So have a great weekend, and see you next time. Thank you.